Hey, well, welcome to Neighborhood. We want to invite you guys to come on in and sing with us this morning. Sing, I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me your citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing, now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are my name. Oh, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day.
Sin and shame, they were like prisons that we couldn't escape. But he came and he died and he rose. Those walls are rubble now. Remember those giants we called death and grave. They were like mountains Thank you so much for worshiping with us this morning. Go ahead and take a seat and check out the screens.
Hey there, Neighborhood Church. My name is Jordan. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hey, if it's your first time with us at Neighborhood Church, we want to invite you to come check out the Next Lounge after service on the patio. This is a space we've created where you can come say hi. We'd like to answer any questions you might have. And ultimately, we want to help you take a next step with us here at Neighborhood Church. Now, if you have to leave quickly today, no worries. Just scan the QR code on the card in front of you to fill out a digital Connect card, and we'll be in touch. Hey, first things first, as you know, we got rained out this weekend. We were so excited for church on the lawn, but it would not have been a great experience. Would have been a little bit soggy, but don't worry, we're not canceling the fun, we're just rescheduling it for Sunday, May 5th. Cinco de Mayo is the day to circle on your calendar for church on the lawn together under the sun. We can't wait to see you there. But in the meantime, we're very excited because this is Easter week, Holy Week is here, and this Easter weekend, we're going to be celebrating Jesus with a number of opportunities, starting with our Good Friday worship service this Friday at 6:30 p.m. You're invited to join us for a time of reflection, worship, and communion as we remember everything Jesus did for us on the cross. And then after that, we're coming together to celebrate Easter. It's a big party as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus across 5 services on Saturday and Sunday. And hey, while you're here, make sure to grab one of our Easter invite cards so you can invite a friend, family member, or coworker to join you. Lastly, we want to say thanks, as always, for your generosity. When you give to the mission of Neighborhood Church, you help us create environments and opportunities that inspire people to live like Jesus. Thank you so much for helping us to be for Visalia. If you'd like to give today, it's really simple. You can give using the boxes in the back of the room, or you can give online at ncvisalia.com/give, or by texting NC Visalia to 77977. Hey, thanks again for joining us today. Let's jump in today's teaching.
Second service, how we doing? I know, we were supposed to be outside, but we're inside. I was so disappointed because I was looking forward to just preaching one time instead of 3 times. So, people keep coming up to me and saying, wow, good call on, canceling the outdoor service. But I have to give credit where credit is due. There's actually a meteorologist who attends Neighborhood Church. And we were like, hey, man, what should we do? So, Gerald, thank you, buddy. It was definitely, we were wanting to do it, but I didn't think it was going to be this wet. I'm kind of bummed out. Also, kind of a crazy week for me. You probably know, I'm a big baseball fan. This is my favorite time of year, and I'm a big San Diego Padre fan. Yeah. There's a lot of people in this room not going to heaven. So just so we're, and so I'm such a big baseball fan, such a big Padre fan. You may not be aware, but the Dodgers and the Padres, they were in Korea for the first 2 games of the Major League Baseball season. And since it was Korea, the timing was a little weird, so the game started at 3 in the morning. So on Wednesday morning at 3 a.m., I got up to watch the game. And my wife gets up, it's like 5:30, she comes out, she's like, where'd you go? I was like, I told you I was gonna get up at 3. She's like, I didn't think you would. And there I was, glued to the television, and the Padres lost to the Demon Dodgers. So, you're not good people. So the Padres did win the next day, and so, but I think this weekend the actual baseball season starts. So yeah, we'll be looking forward to that. But today is the beginning of a whole other kind of week that we need to talk about. And we've mentioned this before, but the Christian church kind of follows its own sort of calendar. It's really a calendar within the calendar that we just call the church calendar. And it's sort of this sort of sacred cadence that it follows. And it's this creative retelling of the Jesus story through some of the big significant events in the life of Jesus. And today marks the biggest week in that church calendar. We call it Holy Week. And it begins on a Sunday that we call today Palm Sunday. And I'm going to get to why we call it Palm Sunday in just a moment. But then, of course, it ends 1 week from now on Easter Sunday, where we celebrate what Christians celebrate as the anchor of our faith, the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. And so it's a really big deal. I mean, Holy Week, it's meant to sort of capture the heart of the Christian faith. It sort of guides us through the final days of Jesus's life, and then his execution at the hands of sort of this collaboration between the Roman Empire and the Jewish religious establishment. Then ultimately it ends with this promise of resurrection. So it's quite kind of a week, right? And we remember on Palm Sunday today, what we remember is Jesus entering the city of Jerusalem as he begins this last week of his life. And he's welcomed, as he enters Jerusalem, he's welcomed as this triumphal king and the long-awaited Jewish Messiah. And one interesting thing about Holy Week that I just want you to keep in your mind is it is an interesting week because we're meant to sort of manage attention. Because on the one hand, it's like joy and it's amazing and, here comes Jesus. But on the other hand, it's really dark and tragic and Jesus dies, right, on what we'll celebrate this coming Friday, Good Friday. And so Holy Week is this weird paradox where joy and sadness sort of cross paths, where hope emerges from the darkest possible moment ever where God is executed, right? I mean, so it's really sort of a dramatic week, and it's why it's the most important week, and it's why we call it Holy Week. And I will just say this, if you want to sort of dive into Holy Week a little deeper and you're not already a part of our daily devotionals that get sent right to your inbox, sign up. You can just go online or you can scan the QR code, go out to the next town. There's a million ways to sign up for our daily devotionals. But the daily devotionals this week will center on Holy Week and sort of get your brain sort of focused that direction. So I want to encourage you to do that. But here's what we're going to do today. It's very, very simple. I just want to read how an early Christian missionary named Mark records this Sunday that we call Palm Sunday. I just want to read it and just walk through it as we read it and just sort of see where we land and see what we can learn and just try to center ourselves as we make our way towards Easter weekend in a few days. So are you okay with that? We're just going to kind of Bible study this thing out and just read a passage and walk through it. I'm going to just give you some of the insights that I find particularly helpful, and then we'll just kind of call it a day. So here we go. Let's dive in. As they approached Jerusalem, this is Jesus and his entourage, if you will. As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives. Okay, so let's just already pause right here because this is kind of significant. We have to ask, where are we in the Jesus story? And we need to know that Jesus has been hanging out in a community called Jericho. So he's been in this little town called Jericho, and now he's making his way to the city of Jerusalem. And now this journey, what you may not know, the geography is a bit significant here. It's actually a fairly dramatic hike. It's only 12 miles, but Jericho's the lowest city in the world. It sits at 800 feet below sea level. And they've got to make, in 12 miles, they're gaining about 3,000 or so feet of elevation gain, kind of up and down on this mountain ridge all the way to the city of Jerusalem. And it would be like if we could move Yosemite Valley floor 12 miles from us, and we just hiked from here to the Yosemite Valley floor in 12 miles. It would be that kind of elevation gain. And don't forget that Israel's like a hot, dry desert. It's not awesome, right? And so they're making this pretty intense hike through hot, dry desert all the way to Jerusalem. Ultimately, though, they're making this pit stop at Bethany, which is sort of sitting on the backside of a hill that we call the Mount of Olives. And the picture you're seeing on the screens now, this is the view from the top of the Mount of Olives looking down into the city of Jerusalem. And where you see that gold dome that we today call the Dome of the Rock, and it's a holy site for Islam, that was the site of the Jewish temple, which is what would have been there when Jesus is there. So that's kind of where we are in the story and sort of the geography and why it kind of all matters. And then we probably have to ask, why is Jesus on his way to Jerusalem? Why would he go anyway? And he does have a great reason. It's to celebrate something called Passover. Now, this is like, we cannot sort of overemphasize the importance of Passover within the Jewish community even today. It's been going on for thousands of years, ever since the nation of Israel was sort of miraculously freed from the bonds of slavery to the Egyptian people. And here's what happened. So this thousands of years ago, the Jewish people, they're slaves to the Egyptians, and then God comes to the Hebrew people and he says, look, I'm going to send an angel of death tonight. And this angel of death is going to take out all the firstborn. But if you want me to pass over your home, then I want you to sort of smear the blood of an innocent lamb on your doorpost, on your door frame. And if I see the blood, I will pass over your house. And so all of the Hebrew people, they do that. They sacrifice lambs, and they put the lamb's blood on their door frames. And wouldn't you know it, that night, the angel of death comes, passes over all of the Jewish homes, but he hits the Egyptian homes pretty hard, killing all of their firstborn, including Pharaoh, the leader of the nation of Egypt, and he loses his firstborn. And this is what sort of sets up the scene that would allow the Jewish people to escape slavery. And so since that moment, since that happened, the nation of Israel has been celebrating Passover, or the night that God passed them over and spared their firstborn, right? And this celebration is about, at least at the time of Jesus, no longer today, but the Passover celebration was still about taking the blood of an innocent lamb, pouring it out over an altar at the temple in Jerusalem. And this would symbolize the forgiveness of sins for the entire nation, right? So Passover is a huge deal. Like, everybody goes to Passover. Jesus would have been joined on that journey from Jericho to Jerusalem by tens of thousands of other Jewish pilgrims. And they are all fired up for Passover. So on the way, they would have been singing and praying and dancing and feasting. I mean, it would have been just a whole party. But eventually, Jesus and his entourage, they do make it to the top of the Mount of Olives, to a little community just on the backside called Bethany. But Jesus is kind of tired of walking at this point, and he decides he wants to finish up his trip from Mount of Olives into Jerusalem, short little trek, kind of down the hill, and back up another little hill to the city. That he doesn't want to walk anymore. He wants to get a ride into the city. And so here's how the story continues. Jesus sent two of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and just as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. And if anyone asks you, 'Why are you doing this?' say, 'The Lord needs it, and we'll send it back here shortly.'" They went and found a colt outside in the street, tied at a doorway. As they untied it, some people standing there asked, "What are you doing untying that colt?" They answered as Jesus had told them to, and the people let them go. When they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks over it, he sat on it. Okay, I know it's kind of a weird passage, like, why is Jesus doing all of that? But Jesus really is being incredibly intentional about choosing what we know from other records that we have of this moment. It's a colt, it's a donkey. It's a donkey. And Jesus is extremely intentional about choosing a donkey to ride into the city of Jerusalem on. What he's doing is he's actually reenacting a prophecy from several hundred years earlier by an ancient Hebrew prophet named Zechariah. And here's what Zechariah said, hundreds of years. And this passage is all about the coming of the long-awaited Jewish Messiah. And here's what Zechariah wrote. "Rejoice, O people of Zion. Shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey." And we learn that this donkey's never been ridden. And its first passenger is, of course, God in human flesh, coming to rescue all of creation. Quite literally, this donkey is carrying the weight of the whole world on its back. And Jesus would have been able to see the temple at the time, one of the most magnificent structures in the whole world, right? And people they're camping all over the hillside, all around the city of Jerusalem, because the city of Jerusalem at the time of Jesus could only hold, we think, about 50,000 people. But historians think maybe 100 to 120,000 people showed up for Passover. So not everybody could actually stay in the city. In fact, we know that Jesus himself doesn't even stay in the city, right? But they're camping all around the city, right? And so this is sort of what's happening. And I would say this. The other thing, so Jesus is looking out, there's crowds everywhere, he's on the donkey, so the top of the Mount of Olives, he sees the temple. The other thing he can see right to the right of Jesus' view would have been a Roman fortress called the Fortress of Antonia. And at the time, right, Israel's not a free nation. They're occupied by the Roman Empire, and they built a fortress to house their soldiers. At any given day, there was always about 600 Roman soldiers in Jerusalem. During Passover, probably anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 soldiers because of the increased population, right? And so it's kind of this, again, it's this paradox, it's this tension, right? We've got the joy, Jewish celebration, right? Passover, yeah, it's amazing. And then the reality, as he makes his way down the Mount of Olives, of the Roman occupation, right? And that they are, in fact, not a free people. They are enslaved and oppressed by the Romans, right? And so, again, I've already mentioned Jesus is very intentional about the ride he's taking into Jerusalem. He's also very intentional about the day and the time that he's entering the city of Jerusalem. It's 2,000 years ago, when Jesus is making the ride, it wasn't called Palm Sunday. It was called Lamb Selection Day. Lamb Selection Day. And Lamb Selection Day was the day that you and your family would go choose a lamb that you would offer as a sacrifice. And this would sort of represent the forgiveness of sins for your family in particular. Lamb Selection Day, a huge deal, right? And everyone's excited, right? Because again, you're choosing this lamb that's going to represent the sins of your family, such a big deal. And I mean, just imagine the scene. There's like 120,000 people trying to find that perfect lamb, right? Just imagine like all of Visalia, essentially, going to Hillcrest Farms to get their Christmas tree, right, in Reedley, all on the same day. I mean, it would have been absolute chaos. And maybe one question we should ask is, why Jesus chose that day? I mean, is there something significant about Lamb Selection Day, or was just Sunday a good travel day? You know, what's going on? And the reality is, there's actually huge sort of spiritual significance to the day Jesus is entering the city of Jerusalem. But to grasp it, we actually have to go back 3 years. Jesus is just sort of kicking off his ministry, kind of going public with everything. And he wants to be baptized. He's got a cousin that today we call John the Baptist, or John the Baptizer, who's out by the Jordan River, sort of this major river that goes through Israel. And he's baptizing people. And Jesus decides that he wants to be baptized too. So he shows up for John to baptize him. And when John sees Jesus coming, John says something incredibly significant. Here's what he says. He says, "Behold, the Lamb of God sent to take away the sins of the world." Now, this makes quite an interesting picture, I think, now that Jesus is entering the city of Jerusalem, the last week of his life, on Lamb Selection Day. We see kind of very literally the imagery happening here, that Jesus is, again, declaring himself, I'm the Lamb of God, and I am now making myself available to anyone for the choosing. That on your Lamb Selection Day this year, this Passover, you can choose me. Will you choose me? So Jesus, he's incredibly specific and intentional about when he comes into the city. He's really intentional about how he comes into the city, right? We've already mentioned ancient prophecy, that donkey, all of that. But here's something else. He's also really intentional about the direction he comes into the city from. He's coming from the Mount of Olives, which is directly east of Jerusalem, right? I see Jesus coming down the mountain. He's coming from the east. Now, here's what every Jew in the first century would have known that you may not know. But it's every single thing that was ever written about the long-awaited arrival of the Jewish Messiah. Everything written about it always has him coming into Jerusalem from the east. He's always coming from the Mount of Olives. This was well known in Jewish culture. This is just active part of Messianic literature. Everybody on Passover, if you were a good, faithful Jew, you'd have been having a party and celebrating, but you would have had one eye on the Mount of Olives to the east, just in case today was the day the Messiah would show up. Every committed Jew would have known and would have thought, if the Messiah is going to come, he's going to come right now, and he's going to come from right over there to our east. Actually, our east is that way, right? But he would have been coming from that direction. In fact, still today, 2,000 years later, right? There's a cemetery on the side of the Mount of Olives. And people want to be buried there, but it's very expensive to be buried there. In fact, average burial site in Israel, about $5,000. You want to be buried on the Mount of Olives, just east of Jerusalem, it's about $30,000 to be buried there. Now, why would somebody pay that much? Well, because that's where the Messiah is going to come, right? And they want to be sort of first, like in Jewish tradition holds it, the resurrection of the dead, the first to be resurrected when the Messiah shows up are those on the Mount of Olives who are buried all the way. So if the Messiah is going to show up coming from the east, they want to be as far east as they can get. So they want to be buried on the Mount of Olives. Still today, Jewish people want to be buried on the Mount of Olives because for them, the Messiah hasn't shown up yet. And so they want to be the first to be resurrected with this coming Messiah, right? So Jesus, again, we've got the donkey, we've got Lamb Selection Day, but we also have Jesus coming from the east, which is hugely significant. And then here's how people respond. Here's how the story goes. It's kind of interesting. So again, you've got crowds everywhere, right? 120,000 people. It's a mess. Many people see all of this, Jesus coming from the east on the donkey, all of that. None of this would have been weird. This would have been like so symbolic to everybody. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, while others spread branches they had cut in the fields. Now we know from other accounts of this moment that it's not just random branches. These are actually palm branches. It's why we call today Palm Sunday. While others spread palm branches they'd cut in the fields. Those who went ahead and those who followed shouted, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David." Remember, David was kind of the king during the golden age of Israel, so he's kind of a big deal. Hosanna in the highest heaven. Now, in the Middle East, in Jerusalem, in Israel, you do not spread your coats on the road, and you do not go get some palm branches for just anybody. You don't do it for somebody's birthday. You don't do it for a spouse or a friend, family member, or even someone important. No, you only do all of this for a king. This is how you treated royalty. This is what you did if you thought the king was coming to town, if you thought that God had finally moved again and the Messiah was present. That's when you do this. Now, it's kind of interesting. It's not the first time it's happened. The Jews actually did this once before. About 200 years earlier, there was a guy named Judas Maccabeus, and he decided it was long time to kick out kind of another foreign occupying guy. He was from Syria. His name was Antiochus. And Antiochus was a huge jerk. You probably know that Jewish people don't eat pork. But Antiochus, when he conquers Israel and he conquers Jerusalem, he goes into the temple and he sacrifices a pig on the temple's altar. Right? I mean, it's desecrating the temple. I mean, it's just awful. So Judas Maccabeus, he incites like a revolution, a revolt, and he ends up winning. And when King Judas comes into the city, we're told that they're doing the same thing, that they've got the cloaks on the ground and they've got the palm branches and they're singing, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." I mean, they thought this was it, only for him to get wiped out by the Romans not long after, and he clearly wasn't it. But archaeologists, we actually have coins. We have coins from the time of King Judas when he came 200 years before Jesus. We have coins, and you know what's stamped on the coins? Palm branches. Palm branches are stamped on the coins because it was a time when Israel was actually free from any foreign occupier, right? And the palm branch represents national pride and freedom and independence, right? And oftentimes rebellion, right? We're going to kick out these foreign occupiers, these bad guys. And so when Jesus is coming in 200 years later and they've got the palm branches, they're doing all that. I mean, this is about rebellion as much as anything else, right? Forget the Romans. We never liked them anyway. You know, Jesus is our guy. Like, here's the palm branches. All of that's going on. And even the Romans knew what palm branches meant. It meant freedom. It meant independence. And the Romans did not want freedom and independence for the Jewish people. It would have been like us sort of waving an American flag, right? I mean, it's just like a huge, huge, huge deal. And you only did it for a king. You only did it if you thought that king was the long-awaited Messiah that was going to make the world right again, right? So these people, when Jesus is coming in on the donkey from the east, right, palm branches, the whole thing, what they're doing is they're saying, long live the king, hail the king, worship the king, our Messiah, right? I mean, this is a big deal. But not everybody is happy about it. In fact, there's one demographic of that 120,000 people, there's one demographic that's absolutely freaking out that this is happening. They're stressed out of their minds that the crowds are going nuts for Jesus. Because again, they're fully aware that the Romans are fully aware what all of this means. And they're pretty afraid that the Rome is going to respond violently because the Romans don't like their subjects declaring other people king. That's not how it works. And so there's this demographic. They're actually a group of religious leadership within Judaism. It was a sect known as the Pharisees. And they go to Jesus, right, in the middle of all of this, and they're like, Jesus, you have got to tell these people to be quiet. You've got to tell them to shut up. The Romans are not going to like this. Please be quiet. Here's how it gets recorded. But some of the Pharisees among the crowd said, teacher, they're talking to Jesus, rebuke your followers for saying things like that. Like, come on. Like, I get it. You're on a power trip, Jesus, but you got to tell them to be quiet because if they're not quiet, the Romans may shut this down hard. They may shut it down violently, right? And then Jesus responds to this. I mean, it's just such a fascinating thing that Jesus does. You know, he's at the center of this. I mean, he's why all of this is happening. And these Pharisees, right, the pastors show up and they're like, hey, can you tell your people to quiet down? Like, it's a little too much. We don't want to cause a ruckus. And Jesus responds. And what I love about how Jesus responds is that I think he's getting at the heart of who you and I were created to be, or at least what you and I were created to do. First and foremost. It's so beautiful and it's so life-changing, but I think we just pass over it so often. So the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the pastors of the day, they're freaking out about propriety. Please tell them to stop singing worship songs to you, Jesus. And here's how Jesus responds. Well, I could, but if they kept quiet, then the stones along the road would burst into cheers. It's kind of interesting, right? So just take a moment. Again, just picture the scene. Keep this scene in your mind. Streets of Jerusalem, buzzing with excitement. Jesus riding in on a donkey. The crowd's going wild. Shouts of praise, worship, long live the king vibes. Everyone can just feel it. A new era is being ushered in. And I hope you can see this like huge revolutionary parade going on. Jesus at the head of all the commotion. It's all being driven by the story of Jesus' miracles, by their desire for a Messiah, for their freedom, right, from Rome's occupation. All of that's happening. In the middle of it all, here come the pastors demanding silence, and then Jesus just offers profound truth right in the middle of it. And he says, look, I can tell them to be quiet. But even if they are quiet, then nature will go ahead and testify to what's happening here today, that the king has arrived, that God has shown up, and everything's about to be made right again. And if the people don't worship, then the rocks will, because the worship of Jesus is woven into the very fabric of creation. Everything in this world has a song to sing to its creator. From the rustling of the leaves to the crashing of the waves, and apparently even the rocks have a song to sing to their creator. Later, an early Christian thinker named Paul would talk about it this way. He says, all of creation is like groaning, waiting waiting for the day that Jesus would come, right? I mean, it's all of this. And so creation, I mean, Jesus' point, I think, is that creation knows and recognizes God. And if you and I don't speak up, if our lives aren't these acts of worship to Jesus, then Jesus is saying, well, then that's okay. You don't have to. This is an invitation, not a demand. Then the rocks will show up. If you don't show up, the rocks will show up. Jesus' words, if they keep quiet, the stones along the road will burst into cheers. It's an invitation, I think, for us to consider as we begin Holy Week, right? It's our own recognition, like where are we at in regards to our own recognition of Jesus as King? I mean, it's this kind of a big deal. Maybe you're here and you're like, Forrest, you're out of your mind, and you're here and you're not a Jesus person. It's okay. You do not, we say all the time, you can belong here and be a part of who we are and not believe what it is that we believe. But at the heart of what we believe at Neighborhood Church is that it's all about Jesus. And it's always been about Jesus. And everything we do should be about Jesus, right? That's kind of our approach to this thing. And so Jesus is just simply reminding us that we should show up, because if we don't show up, Jesus does have a backup plan, and it's the rocks. And quite frankly, I don't want to be shown up by rocks, right? And so as we begin the holiest of weeks in the Christian tradition, we start by reminding ourselves of the core of our identity. And the core of our identity isn't what we do. The core of our identity isn't what we've achieved. The core of our identity isn't kind of what we know or what we've accumulated, or maybe even on the flip side, what tragedy or challenge in our life that's come to define us. It's not any of that. The core of our identity is that you and I were meant to worship. We are defined by who or what we worship. And from the Christian tradition, we say that we worship Jesus. He is our King. The Christian perspective that says you and I are first and foremost created to acknowledge and worship Jesus and to pledge allegiance to him as our King. Our lives are meant to be these living statements of Jesus' goodness, his grace, his sovereignty, right? And ultimately his love. And yet, it's just an invitation. We have the choice. We can remain silent. But if we do, if our lives fail to reflect the worship due him, then Jesus himself has declared it's okay. The rocks will do your job for you. And so to wrap up this morning, I just thought it was maybe most appropriate that we close by worshiping. And so I invited the band just to come out and just kind of lead us in singing one more song as we just worship and acknowledge Jesus as King, his sovereignty, his lordship, that he is worthy and due our worship. And again, you may not be there or able to kind of acknowledge that, and that's perfectly okay. But if you are here, I would say the best way we could start Holy Week is by worshiping and praising Jesus as King. So would you stand with me? And let me pray, and then the band will lead us in one last song. Father, and thank you. Thank you for Holy Week. Thank you that there is this sacred cadence that we can follow and sort of shape our lives around. And today's such a huge day in that rhythm, where we just remind ourselves that we were meant to worship. We were designed to worship, to offer you praise, to pledge our allegiance to you, Jesus. And you've invited us to do that, and we have the choice to not. And that you've got a backup plan, the rocks. But this Palm Sunday, this Holy Week, may we not leave it up to the rocks. May we be a people who give you the worship you deserve. Jesus, we love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
stop, Lord Almighty? Who can 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 stop, Lord Almighty? Oh, who can stop, Lord Almighty? Yeah, who can stop the Lord? 'Cause our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him. 'Cause our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him.
All right. Hey, Neighborhood Church, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. On your way out, stop by. We've got food trucks outside. We have postponed Church on the Lawn, but there is still delicious, delicious stuff out there. Help support those local vendors. Otherwise, grab a fat stack of these Easter invite cards. Next week, we are celebrating Jesus the entire weekend. Good Friday worship service, tons of Easter services. Grab some cards. Invite a friend, family member, stranger on the street. We don't care. Everyone's invited. Have a great week. We'll see you soon.